Housing is where you go at the end of the day, your home base.
We're breaking ground today on Carson Square. It's a 36 apartment development, 21 bedrooms, 16 two-bedrooms, all affordable housing. When you start looking at the demographics of this area, we have some really serious issues in terms of affordable housing. We have a lot of the population that's, really struggling to make ends meet. And it's very difficult in this area, particularly Traverse City, Garfield Township, to find affordable apartments.
But the problem is not limited to Traverse City.
The problem in Northport is not dissimilar to the problem throughout a five-county region.
Actually, it's not even limited to the five-county region.
On a daily basis, our office and myself both get contacted for rentals. Rental demand is extremely high in this community, and the rental demand is for people who are transitioning here for jobs. They're coming in to work at the prison. The hospital is a very big draw.
This is a very high-cost housing area, so the whole entire Leelanau County is expensive. This is a resort community. Property owners can rent out their property for $1,500 to $5,000 a week.
That's right, he said week.
Certainly the cost to rent those houses is not affordable for everyday workers.
While it's true those rentals aren't marketed towards average workers, that's kind of the point. Very little is. How many hours a week do you typically work?
I say about between 32 and 39. I want a job that'll help us cover the rent, like I can cover the rent.
Many people who are working at minimum wage, and it's very challenging to afford rental housing on minimum wage.
And then he started telling me different things about the rent and all this. I said, okay. Yeah, the deposit on it. I said, I can't come up with $725 right now. But we tried working with them through Tip of the Mid Housing, and it did not go anywhere. So
housing is considered affordable if an individual pays 30% of their adjusted monthly income for housing expenses.
That 30% figure is relative to every person's income across the board. So if you make $10,000 a month and you spend $3,000 of it on rent and utilities, you live in affordable housing. If you work at a minimum wage service job, like many in northern Michigan, you'd make potentially $13.58 a month. For you, an affordable rent would have to be $408 a month, which is unheard of in this community. And that's assuming you get full-time, which is not at all guaranteed.
If you only make $600 or $900 a month from wages or part-time work, it's very, very hard to find a place to live for $300 a month or $200 a month without a rental subsidy.
It's also very hard to find a place with a rental subsidy.
We recently got up on the list for the Mr. Housing vouchers, but we couldn't find anything, so it's we're back down at the bottom again. They were giving us, what, 683. The place has to be under 683 with the utilities and everything. $50 of that is our responsibility.
Citydata.com lists the median rent in Traverse City as $801 a month, which is more than half of what a minimum wage worker makes in a month.
Right now, somebody earning an average, the minimum wage, working 40 hours, can't afford the rent for any of the units that exist in Traverse City at market rate today.
It can be financially feasible if there's a roommate or another wage earner in the house, but that's assuming you can find a place. They go fast.
Probably a dozen individual owners or more of rental homes in Manistee that have anywhere from 1 rental property to 10 rental properties. There's very little available. There's usually a waiting list.
The wait list on most of them are, you're talking a year and a half. Some are up to 5 years. So we get this list, and we're calling on this list, and I call this guy, and he goes, and the first thing he does is he laughs at me. He goes, I'm still on that list. I haven't had a place for rent in 6 years.
you may have landlords that don't want to rent to you.
Landlords can be extremely picky because they have that opportunity. They've got so many people to choose from.
We got into a trailer and then that kind of got all messed up in telling us that we had to pay $1,000 a month for a trailer. And we said, no, we can't do it. So they gave us a timeline to get out, which was June 1st. We all went down to Sunset Park. We had all our luggage. Everybody had their luggage, and we didn't know where we're going, what we're going to do.
Some of the restaurants had people that were living in tents out at the state park. People living in their cars.
We live in our Vargo, which is basically the van's been converted. I took out all the back seats and put a bed in.
Wow.
Built a frame, and then that leaves storage you can get to from both sides, or because it opens on both sides in the back and stuff like, well, it did until this winter. So it's kind of falling apart.
Would it be expensive to get that kind of thing repaired?
It's not so much expenses. Where do we stay while it's being fixed? Because it's going to take a while. They'd have to take our bed out for one, and everything else would have to come out. What do we do with that? Stick it up on a pile on the beach, you know?
We were just more or less bouncing around, bouncing from house to house and trying to find a place to stay and trying to look for a place to stay, looking for jobs at the same time. It was hard. It was hard. There was a lot of heartache.
We've looked at the working poor, but they're not the only group that's struggled to find housing.
Affordable housing is more than just, is there housing enough for people who have experienced homelessness? Because we need affordable housing for people, for young adults who are teachers or firemen or entry-level social workers.
Even young professionals who make about $30,000 a year are having a hard time.
The hospital here hired me, and I thought Manistee was a great place to come and start a new life and a new career. I love coastal towns, and that's why I thought Manistee was a great place to start. The issues actually started before I even came here, because there were very few apartments listed online. So it was difficult to even find places to set up appointments for. The first couple places that I looked at were extremely small, and to be honest, some of it, I wasn't even sure if it was structurally sound to live in. I came for the weekend and I looked at those 2 or 3 apartments, and none of the apartments were going to work out. And I left somewhat frustrated, but thought something would come up. And I did some research over the next couple of weeks, and then came back again in the middle of December. And basically the same thing had happened.
The scarcity of housing means that landlords don't need to be competitive or put in any extra effort.
I went back after that trip extremely frustrated because I could not find anything. I did call a couple of realtors.
People are calling you. Of course you're going to call a real estate office because we're in the housing business. But when you really can't help, it's pretty frustrating.
Just say in the last 7 days, I've probably had contact with 10 different people for rentals. Have I found any of them a rental? No.
You try to help. So if I happen to know of anyone who's got a vacancy coming up.
I don't know where a lot of people go. I honestly don't. It's like, I know that I had a couple people call me and say they were living in the motels, but they had to be out because the season starts.
I was getting a little concerned because I was going to start work in a couple weeks. I didn't want to live out of a hotel.
Now let's look at Stacy.
Originally from Texas, moved to Michigan when I was 8 years old, and ended up going to Western Michigan University and met my husband. So we stayed around the area there in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and both had careers there, bought a home. When we saw the opportunity to move up to a lake town, we got really excited. We're very athletic, we like to be outdoors, so being able to be that close to the water where you live and work was pretty exciting.
Her husband and several other football coaches from Portage were hired in Manistee. He moved up before she did.
As a football coach, you want to start conditioning and getting things started and meet your team for the next year. So he wanted to come up here as soon as possible. So him and as well as the other coach. The head coach actually had moved up previously and had a house that he was renting. So my husband and the other coach would stay with him and his wife. And they also have 2 kids and a dog. So interesting situation.
Still, they were lucky enough to have a home base during their search.
They did end up finding something. I actually looked at it for them, and it was a little cottage across from the beach. Sounds perfect, ideal, but it was a rental for vacationers. So in the off season, you could rent it monthly, but you had to be out before Memorial Weekend, and you couldn't get in it until after Labor Day.
And then they have to either go back home or figure something else out for the summer, which is even more difficult.
And they got in just in start time for school, so they're moving everything in. It came furnished as a beach cottage, so there wasn't a lot of storage. I think it was under 900 square foot, so 2-bedroom, 2 guys moving in. I'm up on the weekends, and we also have 2 dogs. So very tight quarters for a married couple that had owned their own home for over 8 years.
Northern Michigan's status as a vacation destination tends to complicate matters of long-term housing.
We're not trying to exaggerate the seasonal component, because we have that already. Obviously, it's a wonderful, summer place.
The focus of the housing squad at this point is pretty much based on trying to deal with some housing for perhaps young people hoping to live in this community and get a start.
People start out wanting rental apartments or rental houses, and they move on and their family grows, and they move on then to wanting to have a single house.
We're trying to develop a more year-round community because we want to have young families with kids who will go, be part of the school.
We have an excellent school system in Northport, but it has like 145 students for the entire district, K-12.
We've pretty much identified through our studies and confirmed by the Northwest Connection studies that what really we could use is an apartment complex.
Coming from Kalamazoo, obviously it's a college town, there's rentals everywhere, apartment complexes, so I'm used to that, and to come up here and there's not a single apartment complex for like a young professional.
According to this report, in Northwest Michigan, local zoning ordinances focus overwhelmingly on the construction of single-family homes. Our housing options just lack the diversity you see in other communities.
I mean, I really liked our house that we had in Kalamazoo. I mean, it was our starter home. It was a cute Cape Cod that we basically gutted and made it our own.
Where we lose some of our millennials to in Ludington, that is an apartment complex with carports and a pool that allows pets. And I always cry when they choose to go to Ludington, because I believe Manistee is the place to be.
Creating more and better housing options is vital, particularly if we ever want to fix this whole workforce shortage.
I think right now many of our merchants are really kind of desperately looking for employees.
There's a definite need for people.
Luckily, a lot of college students come back who grew up in Traverse City, and so they come back for the summer, so they're living with their parents, and so there's that pool of employees that definitely work downtown for the summer. But anybody who maybe didn't grow up here, that's where we're finding the struggles.
I wonder why that might be.
We're a very service-driven economy. So, a lot of people, they're probably above minimum wage, but they're certainly not in a range where they can afford, the $800-900 or more a month, that rents for apartments are going for in this area.
If you were to look at the jobs that are being posted right now, there's thousands of positions that are available, because we don't have a lot of workers that are right now physically living in our area that are able to take those positions.
And they're not coming, at least not anytime soon. And why should they, when there's no place to live? Even people currently working in the area are having to move further and further out.
People are finding that they have to drive a long way to work in Northport because we don't have places for them to stay here, and that's also true in the other villages within the county.
A lot of times people in this area tend to move out far enough so that the rent goes down.
Many people refer to this affordability farther out from the Traverse City limits as drive till you qualify, or drive till you can afford the housing.
But it doesn't resolve the issue, because it's not just rent, it's also the cost of the vehicle, the cost of gas, the maintenance of a vehicle.
Housing may be more affordable for a one-bedroom unit in Kalkaska, Mansalona, perhaps Bel Air, Fife Lake, Benzonia, and yet the people looking for housing may have connections or jobs in Traverse City. So there's the challenge. You know, do you give up your job and go someplace where you can afford to rent an apartment, and then good luck trying to find work in Fife Lake?
And there are several reasons why you want your workers closer to the community.
If you're working in Northport, but you're driving to Interlaken to live, you're taking your paycheck and spending your money, you know, in the Interlaken community. Great for Interlaken, but not so great for the Northport community. And so when you have housing and people living in the town, they're spending their money, you know, within the community. Just it's healthy for all of us.
Let's look at solutions. Many communities have set up housing authorities and housing commissions to look at the issue. Northport calls their group the Housing Squad.
The term commission and authority is negative to a lot of people. They don't like it.
The group is fairly new, but they're identifying obstacles that need to be addressed. One is that there needs to be an incentive for developers to build affordable housing, because it won't happen naturally in this market.
We have some developments in mind right now that are being looked at, but they're not affordable housing.
The incentives for builders and developers to do these kind of projects has waned. The profit margins are not what they are with a big expensive development.
It's a hard sell. We want developers to make apartments that the average worker can afford, but if they make a vacation place, they can rent it out for how much again?
$1,500 to $5,000 a week.
So you can potentially earn the entire year's profit of an affordable apartment in just a couple weeks of a vacation place. Which do you think they prefer?
My understanding is that there's only actually a few developers in the state that actually are into the affordable housing.
A developer has to look entirely differently at the funding scheme, how to do it. And they have to get grant fundings and subsidies.
There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of paperwork that has to go through the state. You have to have the experience to know how to get through that maze.
So we're after a rare breed of developer, but that's not an insurmountable problem.
If you get really experienced developers, which I think we can get, they're not turned off by that process, and they understand the state and federal funding criteria.
The other obstacle is understanding the municipalities, understanding the components and what their participation is going to need to be in order to have a developer do a project that's subsidized.
So there's a lot of government groundwork that needs to happen before affordable housing developments can get underway. Some of it's already happening. The Leelanau County Board of Commissioners voted 4-2 to create an affordable housing task force. Commissioner Bill Bunnock voiced his dissent.
We had a goal of helping someone out that wanted to do something. Well, instead of helping now, we're leading it. It's something that has to be addressed, by local zoning, by local villages, and by the state's building department. And I hope the task force can work. I just think it's starting from the wrong direction.
Whether or not the county should be leading the effort, it's clear that affordable housing is going to take a lot of government collaboration.
The village is very small. It has a very tiny operating budget. So it is not feasible for the village to finance affordable housing programs on its own. It has to partner with other groups. And the partnerships can be varied. The partnerships can be with other governmental entities such as the county.
So it does take government, political will, and unity, county, township, village, and that's something we're working on.
Political will might be the trickiest aspect. It requires the support of us fickle constituents.
We can't do it alone. What our next steps are to have some public outreach, to meet with some of the existing groups in Northport.
It's important to have the public on board from the standpoint that the political bodies may be asked to make some kind of contribution to this effort, and it's a lot easier for the political bodies to make those decisions if they have a public who recognizes what the problem is and realizes the benefits to them.
Affordable housing has a stigma attached to it. I mean, you think of the old style tract housing and riffraff that's associated with it. So there is an old stigma, and you can really see when you start looking at this, the type of housing that's being built is really beautiful. It's really attractive, and it can be, you know, and not only that, the important thing is that you'll have a more diverse community if you have more young people, young families living in the community.
Public opinion might be the most important factor in bringing affordable housing to northern Michigan. Without it, everything could fall apart.
What we can't have is, we can't be encouraging a developer to come in and create a 9 to 12 unit housing development and give them a lot of grief and a lot of bad press and a lot of negativity. Because first of all, they can go lots of places to do their development.
And trust me, we really want them to come here.
If your business wants to grow and you want to attract, let's say, a younger demographic, the young professionals, we have to have housing for them.
We need a development for people who maybe they're townhouses, maybe they're a little larger than a regular apartment, maybe a 2-bedroom apartments, but have the amenities that the young people are looking for, but still close to downtown. And I believe I actually have some land for sale that someone could develop on that. But
I know we would all like to see at least something happen a little sooner, and maybe the onesie-twosies will be able to happen, meaning 1 or 2 houses, you know, will get something going.
It is a long game. I think the community that addresses it soonest will be the one who will gain the most from it.